Now we're joined on the programme too by Professor of Cybersecurity at Ulster University, Professor Kevin Curran. Good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning, Greg.
Great to have you on. Great to see you. Great to hear you.
Yeah.
Right, now, I suppose it's not surprising that we are seeing an increase in cybercrime during Covid-19. I think sometimes when we think of the people behind this, we think of sort of like a chancellor in his bedroom, casting a wide net, no great level of organisation, no great plan, but it couldn't be further from the truth. This is I would say it's a massive industry, completely illegal and horrible, but I'd say the money's massive.
Absolutely, it can be. And I question the increase because it's going to happen naturally. The increase in cybercrime is happening all the time. It increases because the whole world has moved online. That's where the money is. Cash is very little used in society now. So therefore, that's where the money is, and that's where the criminals are going. So it was always going to increase. I know that we read a lot about the COVID, and of course there are COVID-related scams, and they're a particular problem at the moment. But cybercrime will always exist, and it'll always be there, and it's on the increase.
So with that in mind, we have to, and this is without, by the way, this is not letting telecommunication companies off the hook or letting banks off the hook, because they need to do their thing, maybe one or two or three stage identifying or whatever it might be. But we have to take we can't rely on the telephone companies and the banks or the other agencies' revenue to do this for us. We have to take responsibility on ourselves, don't we? Is that the only real way we can make sure we're safe?
Absolutely, and you only get that through experience and surfing again. That only a liar says they've never clicked on a phishing email, for instance. And the problem, of course, there's lots of problems, but one is especially with mobile phones now, because Google control most of the web, and there's this particular technology called accelerated mobile pages, AMP. And of course, what that leads to is a real good use for Google. They can control their ad networks, they can stop malicious ads. But unfortunately, on a mobile device, if you hover over a link, you really can't see whether that's got the real name of the company in the link, or it's again one of the shortened URLs. And that is a particular problem because most people are doing their emails on their mobile devices. There's so many emails that come in for me that look so real, they're almost perfect, but I wait till I go back to my desktop computer and I use my email client and I can see full links, and I practice, as you can imagine, safe computing. So desktops help me, but of course with the mobile phones, that is a particular problem. Along, of course, with the actual nightmare, which is COVID, because everything has changed. We're filling out forms we never imagined 6 months ago. And we're seeing things from the government, we're seeing things from employers, we're seeing things we've never seen in the history, of mankind. So therefore, you don't know if that email coming in is from the tax office, from the government, is for your new type of loan scheme or whatever else. So therefore, that's one of the particular problems, again, that people are not sure if the emails coming in, whether it is a new scheme launched by the government, whether it's a new thing that they really should click on, whether there really is compensation for this particular XYZ during COVID. And the rules have changed, and COVID has really, really messed things up.
Now, Liveline on RTE, they've done 2 weeks on a Bank of Ireland scam. It's not a Bank of Ireland scam, sorry, it's a bank exploiting Bank of Ireland customers, and it's quite a clever scam. And they've been had money stolen from them in the hundreds of thousands, it seems. But not one of those people, and I have nothing but sympathy for them, not one of those people would have lost money if they hadn't clicked a link and they hadn't inserted their 6-digit code. And in doing so, they authorized access to these horrible illegal scammers. So my point being is that, again, and sorry to go back to it, don't click in a link in a message, for crying out loud. Do not input by request your personal information, like in terms of passwords and stuff.
Absolutely. You come out of your browser and you go to the original website that it is, www, whatever, Bank of Ireland, and you log in from there. And then you can also phone them again, to be sure, when it comes to large amounts of sums of money. And, I've first-hand experience where people have been scammed, because a lot of a lot of law firms obviously deal with housing transfers and monies and people buying property. And I know one particular person who transferred money that looked like it was a legitimate email from a particular law firm. It was a week that the house property money had to be transferred, and they lost £40,000 because they followed the scam, and of course the scammers got the money. But of course they had compromised the law firm's email system and had been waiting there for months. And these are intelligent operators again. So an awful lot of companies, organizations, or emails have been compromised already, and it's very, very difficult for them. In other words, really, when it comes to money, a lot of companies really should have a verbal password and not trust an email that seems to come from their boss, and the boss is asking to transfer X amount of money. They really should pick up the phone and phone their boss and have these procedures in place again, so that they can, get around any scams which look like it really is a legitimate email from someone in authority with the money, because these things are happening. A lot of firms, their emails are compromised already, and the scammers are just waiting for large money transfers so that they can intercept them. Okay,
and that applies across the board. I mean, obviously you're talking about big money there, and we've seen so many different scams, financial people in a company being contacted by purportedly their boss saying, look, can't contact you now because you email this to me, and it's someone not connected to the company whatsoever. But in terms of us domestically, right, just us average folk, other than not connecting links in our text, regardless of how legitimate they may seem or what they may threaten or suggest we could save, especially links that link to a website where they then ask you to input your private information, that means passwords and that means PIN codes. But in terms of email, do the same rules apply? If a company contacts you and say, quick, click this link, you will achieve the same by going directly to the URL and going in legitimately, or picking up the phone and saying, look, I've got this email, is it legit?
Absolutely, and any bank or any organization worth their weight will have given direct instructions in the email saying, go to the log site, log in, blah, 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 and follow the instructions there. Actually, just a caveat for the last one I said about waiting for your boss to phone you. One of the cleverest hacks last year was hackers, they sampled a real person's voice, the person that had authority for transferring money.
Oh, wow.
And they played back a message using his voice, amplified again, just completely sounded like him. The person who was transferring the money believed that their boss was speaking to them, but actually it was computer speaking to them, telling them to transfer the money. They transferred the money. So now there is voice phishing as well. But hacks always improve. They never get worse. So even in that case, you could be fooled again. Yeah. But of course, there are scams on Instagram, there's scams on Facebook where it looks like you're doing a quiz, but really what the scammers are doing is trying to get personal identifying information on you, PID we call it. So therefore be careful when it comes to any online quizzes on Facebook, Instagram, whatever else, what information you input, because all of that can be accumulated by the hackers and used against you.
Or click on this YouTube link, we spotted you doing this, or anything like that. And is it the case, Professor, that they might not exploit that information straight away? I mean, are there fraudsters out there that build up information on a person, so they might try and glean some from Facebook and have a flag on that, and then if they can pick up some other information to sort of form part of a wider scam, do they do it like that, hit and miss, or in an organised way, or do I need to take my tinfoil hat off?
No. There are incredibly sophisticated scams out there who accumulated and cross-pollinate data from different databases as well. So we see that again. They also need being targeted. Generally, most people get caught up because there's brute force hacks done on websites or databases which are downloaded, and you just happen to be in a database. An email is sent to you. They didn't really know you were Kevin Curran. Your email was part of the database, and if you're stupid enough to click on it, you were caught. But there are, of course, hacks like the Twitter hack. The most famous hack of recent weeks has been the Twitter hack again. That those guys used some social engineering. They fooled employees at Twitter. They got access to the God dashboard, which were able to change the passwords of people like Joe Biden and all these household names in America. So again, that was done through social engineering again. So again, someone phones up and says, look, I'm new to the IT department. Can you tell me the login for the account or whatever else? And of course, most of us are trusting and we don't question that again. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, they then were able to bombard the arraignment, which was done via Zoom, on that case as well, with pornography, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but that's been happening a lot. Zoom bombing again into conferences as well. But no, they did it was a wonderful hack actually. What they did, the fact that they overtook the accounts and then they said to people, and these accounts, it looked like Joe Biden and others were tweeting, and it said, if you send for the next hour, if you send me X number of Bitcoin, I will double it and give it back to you. And of course, they made about 100,000 quid or whatever.
And the blue ticks there, and they believe it. Right. Finally, Professor, are companies doing enough? Firstly, I think banks, if they have multiple stage sort of, some of them do, where you have to jump through a couple of hoops before a transaction can be made. Others do it in one click. But also the likes of your Google, your web hosts that allow someone to create a website that is -365banking.com rather than 365banking.com. In other words, they can do whatever they like with our information, and we can see how clever they are at using that. Do they not have the means and the wherewithal, if they had a will, to help us, their customers, in making it more difficult for these criminals?
Yeah, first of all, the web is incredibly complex again. Of course, the giants of the web can do more. But for instance, at the moment, there's about 350. There's actually over 1,000 variations of PayPal.com. PayPal.com is a major payment, and all these fake sites is just a question. Why are the domain registers allowing any variation of PayPal to be registered? And you can say that for a company XYZ. Does companies do enough? You can never prove that, because if you're doing enough, you don't get hacked. But how do you prove that to the people, who are handling the budget in society again? Security always comes at a trade-off between convenience and security. How much do you spend? I mean, businesses are in the business of making money. Of course, no one wants to be hacked now. No one, especially because of the great legislation brought in with EU 2 years ago, the GDPR, where companies can be fined if they're found to be negligent with their data. All those things are great. But any company really has to trade off between how much they put into their IT department, how much they put into their software, their hardware, the network, their routers, everything else. You got to be sensible with it. So again, the wiser your IT department is, the wiser your chief security officer is. All of these things, of course, they can save you a lot of money. But do companies do enough? You can never prove if they are. All you can do is hopefully, just do a risk assessment on your data, on what you store, on the value of your company. What happens if a tornado hits your building again? You can have multiple levels of redundancy. There are companies who have trucks standing by like containers, and they've got their computer systems, completely replicated again. But what company, in St. Johnston or in Letterkenny tomorrow could afford to do that? So really, you got to do your risk assessment. How much is it worth? What will it cost me if we get hacked tomorrow? What will it cost me if I get fined? And then put the resources in to offset that.
What we know is many of us don't have house alarms, and as soon as the house is burgled, people go out and spend a couple of grand on a house alarm, and then we know the likelihood of being burgled again is low. But I suppose it's that's a more just an individual person's attitude, and you can see then how that can be extrapolated into big business. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor, as always.
You're welcome, Greg.
Lovely to see you, lovely to chat to you. That's Professor Kevin Curran there.